So I was lucky enough to get some hands-on time with Manor Lords, a game that is on the top of my wish list because it scratches many itches. The first being broadly historical games that really get into the nitty-gritties. And then in terms of genres, I really like the sort of medieval city management, city simulator a la Banished. I used to play a lot of that back in the day. And then I also like the Total War series and its real-time combat. And seeing those two genres marry together with the respect for the history behind it makes for the almost perfect package for me. So what I wanted to do in this video is just share my initial impressions. This isn't sponsored or anything, it's just me as a gamer, as someone personally interested in this game, just sharing something with you as a community in a more casual format than we're used to. So with that disclaimer in mind, let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to start with a new game here, and one of the first things that really drew me in was this fantastic landing screen where not just, you choose a name and a portrait, but you get to really dive into customizing your coat of arms. There's so many different, dividers, primary, secondary colors, emblems, scaling, tiling, rotation, that you can make almost any emblem to be your coat of arms. In my case, I spent 30-45 minutes playing around until I decided to do something that was more aligned with my playstyle, which is the style of the snail, slow and steady. Now, in terms of the starting game here, you can see I got it actually quite good randomization in my start with access to forest, major materials. And so what I got started with is what you often do in these, city management and simulator games is just start producing raw resources. And in this case, the most important one is going to be just cutting down the forest and turning that into timber. And then you take your timber and you turn that into planks, which you can use as building material. Then after that, I start building out my roads, started adding houses, and then you'll see I start interconnecting all this. Now, for people who are new, an important thing to recognize for these types of games is construction is not instantaneous. There's a lot of parts to it. The first part is you have to move your construction materials from wherever they are to wherever they are going to be for construction. So in this case, you're seeing me purchase some oxes to pull over logs. People then work on the material, build the building, and then once the building is built, you then have to assign people to man those buildings in order to produce the material. So it's all quite different from people who might be used to, Age of Empires or other games, RTS games with instant construction. This is going to be very much different, very much more so leaning into the, the simulation aspect of it. Speaking of this, I got my basic production and houses underway. Now I had to feed my people. So I noticed that there was a big deposit of wild game here. You can zoom in, you can get really up close. And the cool thing about these types of games, and Manor Lords is no different, is they simulate the actions in very historical fashions. Another thing you'll see me take note of here is as it starts to rain, you can get deterioration of your supplies. And so quite quickly, I had to actually start upgrading my facilities, create storage locations, upgrade my temporary camp into a worker camp so that people could be in the comfort of being inside. Therefore, you could see there it triggered an increase in my population, and I could store goods, keep them from deteriorating. Then another thing to note in Manor Lords is the marketplaces are very important. You can't just produce goods, but once they're built, and produced, they have to go somewhere, and that's going to be your marketplace. So the people who man your, production centers are then going to take their goods, put them in a stall, and then that stall is where your other villagers go and pick them up. So you can see here me slowly expanding out my village. As I built out these houses, I realized that they needed to be heated. So we set up a woodcutter's lodge where we're going to be creating some just basic firewood that's going to be pulled into the homes. Another awesome boon of Manor Lords in terms of its immersion is going to be the ability to go actually down on the ground as an individual person, as if you were playing this, like any other, RPG game or, first-person game or third-person game. It's basically there. I mean, there's the physics on the ground. You can bump into people. There's the simulation of the characters, high fidelity models. It's all really great. In this case, you can actually see my folks grabbing the arms and weapons from my main center, bringing them into their newfound homes. And we'll talk about the recruitment system later. But for now, you can see me toggling on different overlays of my local region. There's all sorts of stuff about different fertility, the presence of aquifers, and all of this, which is going to be impactful in terms of how you want to plan it out. Now in this case, I knew that my different houses needed water to meet their basic supplies. I checked the water levels and I built a well. And then you can see here, you have these bespoke animations for when people interact with them that I thought was really awesome. It's well researched, it's definitely believable. And then what you'll see happening is as I have my basic needs met, you can start upgrading your individual houses. Now in this case, I spent some money on this house in terms of upgrading their backyard with a chicken coop, which cost me some money, but over time it's going to give me a constant production of eggs, which will then allow me to have more food for my village. This is going to get built out. And then obviously as a responsible manor lord, I then have to go in and check in on my chickens and make sure that things are okay. I'm wondering if in the future there'll be mods or different things where you can actually interact with the chickens, you know, collect eggs and do more things like that. But that's probably getting too leaning on different genres than what this is supposed to be, which is your high up, city simulator. Anyways, I thought it was really immersive. I forgot that I was actually building different structures, but here you can see here villagers pulling over the logs for what I have going on in the background. And that is going to be another one of my needs for the village, which is church. There's going to be different things that your villagers need in order to upgrade their homes and upgrade, the overall well-being and status of your town, the church being one of them. In this case, I had the wood required, but I didn't have the stone, so I quite quickly scouted out some local stone quarries, started mining that, pulled the materials in, and we finished our first church, which is really cool. You can then upgrade it over time to do various things, but right now it's going to at least meet the basic needs of my guys. You click on this small home, and you can see now that I have all the basic needs met. I can upgrade it to level 2. Once that's done, it's going to make your people more happy. It's going to actually make them more productive, because once you've upgraded it, you can then have more specialization of your people. They're basically being upgraded from mere, subsistence into more developed economies. So in this case, there's abilities to make them artisans who can produce weapons or shoes or clothing, different things like that over time that generate wealth, and you can trade and do all sorts of stuff. So you can start to see the complexity being layered on. But as I upgraded my town, what happened is you can see here new development points were unlocked. So as you skill up and you make your village more complex, you can then invest those into different technologies, which I'll show you later. Now, another thing I wanted to do here is, hey, let's not just live off the land in terms of the creatures of the forest. Let's actually go ahead and start doing crops. So I built some in the open area over here, which was quite fertile. You can then choose what you're going to specialize in for your different crops. There's ideas of crop rotation, etc. And because I wanted to focus on the crops, I decided to invest one of my points here, development points, in the heavy plow, which is going to make my farming just that much more efficient. But if you wanted to, you could do stuff on military or blacksmithing production, or you could do trade. There's all sorts of different specialties. Another thing that I wanted to do now that my village is developing is create my Manor Lords house. So in this case, this is going to allow you to do things like taxation. It's a place to house your retinue. And there's this really cool castle builder that was prompted to me. And so I was like, oh, this is really dope. I can put, walls around my settlement. I could build towers for defense. But at this point in time, it was too expensive for me. But thinking of the future and the resources needed, I decided to build a mining pit to start to accumulate those resources so that eventually I would have enough, in my bank to be able to do those upgrades that would probably be useful for me. In the meantime, I'm going to be going back and forth in terms of meeting the basic needs of my villagers. As those needs are met, population is going to grow and increase, which means, oh, you need more houses. Uh-oh, you have more houses, you have more needs. And so it's this constant, seesawing of increasing your population, meeting its needs, and then increasing your population, so on and so forth. So as you do that, it's important to have more villagers, because in this case, you can see, oh, I can assign them to do tasks. What you can also do is, once you have more villagers, you can actually start to, raise them as a militia. So in this case, I went to the military panel and I told them to start assembling. There's 2 different forces right now. The first is going to be the militia, who's assembling in the back. Those are going to be your everyday villagers who earlier you saw grabbing shields and basic weapons. And then in the front is going to be my more heavily armed, smaller group of folks, which is going to be my lord's retinue coming from the manor. And all of these different groups you can upgrade to get more equipment. But for now, I figured I had a good enough starting warband. So we're setting off in the winter, because at this point in time, I built the fields, but obviously I can't grow anything, and I had my basic needs met. So I decided, hey, let's go ahead and start getting rid of some of these bandit camps around me who have been plaguing me, stealing my materials. And this is where I was able to get my first taste of combat. I wasn't sure what to expect, so I braced my men with some standard formations, and I decided to do, let's experiment. Can you do hammer and anvils and more, advanced tactics that you might see in Total War? And the answer is yes. You can flank around, you can have some dynamic combat, but I would say moderate your expectations a little bit when it comes to the nuances of combat. There's a little bit of kind of, match animation happening here, but it really suffers from some of the issues of, just blobbing that you see in some Total Wars. And then in addition to that, it's just not that nuanced. Yes, armor, weapons, morale, fatigue, all of that is important, but this ultimately is not a battle or wargaming simulator, so it's a little bit simple. But I was nonetheless quite satisfied with at least this combat. So anyways, with the victory achieved, I decided to attack the camp and I got a lot of my goods back. In this case, I was prompted with a message saying, hey, what do you want to do with the stuff that you got from your little raid here? And I was like, well, I'm going to bring it back to my treasury. And you'll see that there's things you can do with your money to either invest in mercenaries or try and do, things for more, civil priorities. With that being said, I thought my mission was done. I was going to start heading back home, start demobilizing my forces, but then at this point, I was prompted with a notification that, there was actually another bandit camp. So the war over winter is not quite yet done. I turned my forces around, but at this point, I was quite exhausted from combat, plus running back, and I was worried that things wouldn't go my way. So we're going to see how much of an impact kind of fatigue does have on combat. In this case, it did seem like my guys were maybe going to be losing out on combat a little bit, but it wasn't as impactful as I feared. My guys still held their numbers, and I think just the overwhelming numbers plus the flanking maneuver that I had routed the enemy bandits quicker than fatigue could come into play. So it seems like fatigue is something to worry about, but it's not the end-all be-all. And at this point, I felt pretty cocky with myself. I sent out my retinue there to collect the supplies. Meanwhile, I was going to send home the rest of my forces and demobilize. Unfortunately, as I did so, I got a notification that there was an army on the march headed into my territory. So I was like, oh, I thought I was the big baddie in the lands, but it turns out this is an even more massive army that's bearing down upon me. I started to sweat bullets here when I started to see how many troops they had, not just bandits that had low armor, but a lot of armor and a lot of weapons. So in this case, I was like, okay, let's invest some of the money we have here into not just upgrading my personal militia, but actually spending that hard-earned cash up front in terms of recruiting mercenaries. So this is something you'll have in your panel. Over time, different mercenaries will come to you, you get a pool, and then you can spend money up front to sign a contract to get people to come to your side. In this case, I decided to go for everything, local thugs included, bring them to my cause. And you pay them up front once, and then there's like a renewal price that you have to do over time. But otherwise, it's good to have this in a pinch. But the one downside of that I didn't realize is, yes, actually the mercenaries don't just appear in your home territory, duh. They have to come from abroad, but that means that they were not in a position to actually defend my camp, defend my position. So I was in a really awkward state where, yes, I probably have the guys to defend my town, but are they going to get there back in time before the enemy army is upon me? So I decided, okay, I have these two archers. Let's go ahead and see if perhaps I can harry this advanced force, maybe sacrifice them or at least scatter to the winds, kite them, maybe do something. So I decided to zoom in and see how good are my archers. Are they going to get bowled over? What kind of a fight can they put up? So for now, I'm just trailing the enemy, and it seemed like they weren't intent on a direct confrontation, so my archers are taking a circuitous route, staying at a position where they could probably engage with them, but not challenge them directly. Now, it turned out there that the pressure was a little bit off because the enemy didn't go after my town, perhaps wary of my mercenaries. So I decided to take a little bit of the time out of my way to have these mercenaries en route just pillage and burn as they went and get rid of some more bandit camps for me. These bandits did not know what hit them. They thought they were charging against my usual troops, but nope, I had 4 full-strength units crashing down upon them. So I'll let you enjoy here a little bit of the combat taking place and kind of lay low on the commentary. And there you have it. After a little bit of battle, my guys were victorious. We then marched through the fields. Winter has now basically ended. So these are, things are looking good for me. My army is assembling, and I'm purging the land of bandit camps while we're at it. Getting quite a lot of money in the bank where I'm like, okay, maybe I'll lose my main army, but if I have enough money in the field accumulated, I can probably get some mercenaries last minute if need be to do a final stand if the main battle goes poorly. So in this case, the enemy was actually forgoing my main lands. I had no idea what their intentions were, but I figured I have an army, might as well use it. So now I'm going to be the one who knocks, and we're going after the enemy. My archer is here on the double, trying to launch an intercept course. And it's only at this point that I realized that, oh, I can't fight them because the enemy was never at war with me. That was an assumption on my part. But I'm not going to let a good army go to waste, and so I decide, well, my army's here, we might as well just declare war on these troops on the march. So in this case, you'll see an ominous immediate reaction from the enemy, far quicker than I was expecting, so I try and get off a quick volley. I'm going to zoom in here to try and make sure we can knock one off, but it's not quite quick enough, so kiting may be harder than expected, but that's why I have 2 units, 1 position in the back who's going to help me at least stagger the enemy, force them to, check their shield wall before they advance. So in this case, this was enough firepower for me to at least, maybe not cause damage, but slow the enemy down while I reformed and my main army rested. So now the enemy has approached my battle lines. I'm going to pull my archers back behind me, and I have one last light troop who I'm going to hide in the forest behind. And this is where I was going to test the idea of, well, what can we do in terms of a large battle? How Total War-esque is it? So in this case, we're going to have a little bit of combat where there's a standoff here. I have shield walls in formation. I hold ground, toggled on. And it turns out it's more Total War than I expected, because you can see some of my guys are being rubber banded back into combat. Some of my archers, a couple units were tagged into them, which is actually having the beneficial impact of keeping the enemy fixed in place in my murder line. So yeah, it does have some of those nuances of Total War, those little bugs where if part of your unit gets dragged into combat, the rest of it will too. So it has the good and the bad of Total War in this case. But with that being said, we're gonna just I'm gonna be quiet here for a little moment, let you enjoy this combat and see what it looks like in Manor Lords when you have 2 rather big armies fighting each other. So in this case, I'm gonna shut up for a second and let you enjoy. So now what I'm going to show you is, it looks like the AI is actually pretty competent in this case. Yes, they did charge into my shield wall, but you'll notice in the distance the archers had taken a flanking route, and they even have some of their own brigands cut in through the forest trying to get at my archers. Luckily, I had laid an ambush of my own in wait, and they're going to come and intercept these brigands, prevent them from striking at my rear, striking at my archers, perhaps collapsing my whole formation. So I was actually quite pleasantly surprised to see how the AI was dealing with my army dynamically. And it seems like cover may have an impact here because my archers were trading preferentially from the woods against the enemy in the open. So at this point, it looks like things are turning in my favor, but I wasn't quite sure how battle would go. Is it like Total War where it's often beneficial to run down the enemy? Is there an advantage of taking wartime prisoners or plundering? I didn't know, but in this case, I had, perhaps a bit of a furor to myself for this army daring to challenge me, even though I declared war. And I wanted to run down everyone and massacre them because, well, these mercenaries are paid for one job, and that's to kill, and they're going to do that job. So yeah, archers are going to be on cleanup duty, and quite quickly the enemy is going to flee, and I'm going to pursue them off my lands. It's at this point that I realized that, hey, it doesn't look like the army is going to be coming back or rallying anytime soon, and it doesn't really look like there's any prisoner count or post-battle loot, so the pursuit is probably not going to be quite as important as I thought it would be at first. But as the saying goes, sometimes it's just about sending a message. But anyways, with the enemy defeated here, I decided to accept the terms laid generously before me of this defeated army. It looked like he was pleading for peace. I decided to agree to these terms, and this is actually going to pad out my bank even further because I had defeated them so soundly that they were actually willing to pay me for this. So here you go. Signed and sealed by my own seat. I get some money for this, for my troubles, which was really nice. So you can see here the advantage of me booting up my war industry is paying off, not just in terms of getting all the bandit camps, but now here soliciting peace from an enemy who's defeated. So we're up to about 750 gold. Really good. I'm coming out net positive in terms of my money. And it's at this point that I'm going to go ahead and dismiss the bulk of my mercenary companies. So it's a quite easy process. You click on them, and then there's going to be a single button to disband this unit. And mind you, it's not going to be by individual group. It's actually the entire company that signed on with you. Whoever's grouped together in the contract, they all get dismissed at the same time. I was going to do the same with my other forces, but not before, throwing them at the other nearby bandit camps, ridding myself of the rest of the bandits on the map, and soliciting, a little bit more gold from these various camps. You can see here the final one, and that means at the end of it, all said and done, I went from about 0 gold at the start of this war into about 800 gold at the end of things. Whereas you can see there in the ticker, if I were just relying on taxes, I'd be going up by 1 or 2 gold, a month or something. So not much. So definitely this waging war is the best way to prosperity. And with that being done, I demobbed basically all my guys. I'm going to finish up with my retinue and my lord, and I'm going to have a gladiator style ending here where we're going to go ahead and walk into the wheat fields and just enjoy a joyous peace here. And yeah, so that was the end of my playthrough, a quite rapid breakdown and summary of my multi-hour playthrough, but I have to say I was very impressed with the game. Obviously a lot more is needed to expand upon it, and there'll be more development and mods over time, but so far really solid. I'm definitely enjoying the city management aspects, which to me harken back to a more polished version of Banished, and plus the real-time combat you can see doesn't quite get to the level of detail of Total War, but for what it is, it's quite good, and the fact that it's paired with the world that you're inhabiting with your developing organic city, the promise of sieges, of cavalry, and things like that means that it's going to be actually quite crunchy in terms of gameplay. So anyways, that's going to be my initial impressions of Manor Lords. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you like this type of gameplay or more casual approach on the channel, let me know. Perhaps we can do more of it in the future. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. Stay tuned for more documentaries, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.